Welcome to the first episode of The Edge. Fired up to get rolling here. I'm your host, Jacob Wayne, joined by Will Schwartz. Had an awesome season last year, just breaking down all kinds of football content, college football, NFL. So excited to bring you guys a lot more of that this year over on The Edge. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Excited to get this thing rolling. And Schwartz, what better way to get started than talking about Michigan football? Spring game happening this Saturday at noon Eastern on Fox. So make sure you tune in if you're a Michigan fan. Schwartz, how are you feeling about Michigan football? Let's just start big picture. State of the program heading into next season.
Well, first of all, I just would love to say I'm pumped to be back. A lot has changed. We've got a new home. I have new glasses. I shaved my beard and got a haircut, but one thing hasn't changed. We are talking Big Ten football first, foremost, not only, but definitely first and foremost. And that means Michigan, the defending national champions. But man, if you see the buzz around this team going into the spring, you wouldn't be thinking defending national champions, would you? I mean, I've always seen this whole season as like kind of the end of a story, the past season. And we got it done, but man, are we about to be starting over. I love a lot of what we're bringing into this season, but it's really hard to offset the losses of guys like Jim Harbaugh, one of the best head coaches in the country, Jesse Minter, the best defensive coordinator in the country, J.J. McCarthy, the best quarterback in Michigan history, and Blake Corum, probably a top 5 Michigan legend of all time. So, I mean, and that's just the beginning of it. So I am tentatively excited. I think we really have a lot of dudes in the building, but oh my word, we have a challenging schedule. We play most of the teams that were at the top of the table at the end of last season, other than ourselves. So I think it's like we play 4 of the other 7 top teams. So I do think that there's a lot of potential in the building, but there's not going to be time or room for us to gel and have growing pains with Texas as the second or maybe third opponent.
Yeah, definitely get rolling early in that non-conference schedule. I think we did it right though. To be honest, we never scheduled an overwhelmingly difficult non-conference game when we were in this kind of pocket of competing for a national title. And heading into this season, we finally have our first really difficult non-conference game in what feels like forever. So that Texas game should be a lot of fun. Schwartz, you mentioned Jim Harbaugh gone to the NFL, going to coach the Chargers. So Sheronne Moore taking over as the full-time head coach, the natural transition at the top there. Led Michigan to a 4-0 record as the acting head coach last season, including the wins over Ohio State and Penn State. So awesome season for him. Finalist for the Broyles Award. We talked about it. I don't really understand how he didn't win the Broyles Award, but that's a whole other conversation. OC at Michigan since 2021, and losing Harbaugh sucks, but I do have quite a bit of confidence in Sheronne Moore, and I know you feel similarly.
Absolutely. And I did think about the Broyles thing, by the way. He was head coach for 4 games. He was suspended for an additional game. So he only really assistant coached 7 games this year. So although we have seen assistant coaches go to interim and win coaching awards in the NFL. But anyways, I digress. Coach Sheronne was the best assistant in the country last year, regardless of what any award says. He's the obvious choice to be the head coach after, before even being named head coach, he has more wins against Ohio State than Jim Harbaugh had after about 7 years as head coach. I'm pumped we're not starting from absolute zero. We have some really solid continuity from last year. We talked all of last offseason about continuity, returning head coaches, returning quarterbacks, and ended up being a huge thing with Jim Harbaugh, JJ, Kalen DeBoer, Penix, Quinn, and Sark, and then Nick Saban being the only other coach in the Final Four. So I don't think we're going to get back to that level, but I think that the program's going in the right direction by tabbing Sheronne. There's going to be a bit of a hiccup this year recruiting-wise, and you're already seeing that. But I do believe in Sheronne to stabilize the ship as soon as he's been in the building as the head coach for a little bit longer, gets his staff under him, gets some comfortability with the next era of the program.
Yeah, speaking of that staff, Kirk Campbell brought in as a new offensive coordinator, was an assistant coach at Michigan since 2022, quarterbacks coach last season, and I give him a lot of credit for some of J.J. McCarthy's evolution last year. And then defense coordinator will be Don Martindale, a.k.a. Wink. First season at Michigan. He's been coaching for forever, since 1986. Definitely a different type of defense than what Jesse Minter wanted to run last year. We'll talk about that in a minute and some of the more defensive personnel stuff. But I want to talk about the quarterback situation, Schwartz. I think 5 guys are going to see snaps in the spring game, including graduate Jack Tuttle, senior Davis Warren, juniors Jaden Denegal and Alice Orji, and then freshman Jaden Davis. Orji's seemingly the leader in the clubhouse right now to be the starting quarterback, but definitely seems like an open competition. What are you hoping to see from the quarterback spot in the spring game among this group?
I definitely think Orji has some kind of weird incumbency advantage for a guy who hasn't thrown. He didn't throw a pass this season, but he definitely saw game time more than Michigan's other QB options. He was our change of pace runner, which I'm really confused by that because you see footage of Orji. He has a nuke. He's an absolute cannon attached to his shoulder. I don't know what he's like in terms of precision, but you'd think that when we put him on the field, if he can throw, we'd at least let him do it a little bit to create openings for his own running. But he did not. He did not have a pass attempted. So what I want to see in a spring game is whether Orji can kind of lead a coherent passing attack. If he can, the debate's kind of over. I mean, without athleticism and any sort of passing ability in terms of precision and refinement and just command of the offense going through his progressions, if he shows any of that at all, it's probably just best to wait on Davis for a year. But if he can't, I would love to see Davis showing a little bit of poise. I mean, he got into the program early. He enrolled last year. He came to the Rose Bowl, came to the Natty, took pictures with the trophy and everything. You'd have to imagine that's for a reason, and that reason being that he's going to at least be allowed to compete. So that's why we were integrating him into the program. So I do think it's Orji's jobs to lose, but if he does lose it, I really want to see some poise from Jaden Davis because I don't doubt his ability at all. It's just whether he goes like a bit Dante Moore-ish where he, throws his first pick six and it makes him throw his second pick six because he loses his head. I want to see him get through some adversity, even if it's just in a scrimmage.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what he looks like. I think the transition as a true freshman into college football, especially Big Ten football with some of the defensive play in this conference, it's a big ask, I think, for him to be ready right away. But definitely excited to see him get on the field. Orji, I'm really excited about. Elite athlete. He was on Bruce Feldman's Freaks list on The Athletic last year. Some awesome testing numbers. Actually ranked number 1 in Michigan's key performance indicators, which tests all kinds of things: flexibility, strength, power, speed, the whole gambit. Vertical jumped 41 inches, 3.97 shuttle, 6.65 3 cone. So really just elite numbers across the board for him. And I mean, you saw it last year when he would come in and come up with some game-changing type runs from quarterback. The question, like Schwartz said, can he throw the ball? So we'll see on Saturday more passing attempts than we've really seen from him since he got to Ann Arbor. So that'll be exciting. And I'm hopeful that with his athleticism, and I mean, he definitely has a strong arm. The question is the processing, the mechanics, the timing, the anticipation, all of those things. We won't really know from one spring game, but excited to see him get a little bit more on the field for sure. So let's talk about the offensive line. Schwartz too, losing the top 6 offensive linemen in snaps from last season. Definitely bringing back some talent though. We bring in Josh Prebe at guard, transfer from Northwestern. We do bring back Miles Hinton, a left tackle, former Stanford transfer. Wasn't fully healthy last season, but Kirk Campbell did say he sees Miles Hinton as a potential 2025 first-round pick. So excited to see him in more of a full-time role. Schwartz, is there anything specific on the offensive line that you're looking forward to seeing on Saturday with so many new starters transitioning in?
Yeah, as Hinton being the one guy who has kind of an established role, I'd like to see him be a leader. We've had great leadership on the O-line over the past few years. And, with Sheronne having to be I trust him a ton with O-line more than anyone else, but he's going to be a little more hands-off with the position than he's been in years past, having gone from an O-line coach to an offensive coordinator and down to the head coach. So going to need on-field leadership. And in that vein, we've had some great centers, and I want to see something from Greg Crippen, he's had a few snaps over the past few years. I think he's played almost 200 snaps since he's come into Michigan, but he's an IMG Academy guy, seems to have good, athleticism numbers, big dude. If he can be a solid center for us this year, I think that would go a long way towards establishing kind of the on-field leadership we need, getting those blocks set up and, building from the inside out.
Yeah, agreed. Let's talk about some skill guys now. Leading rusher Blake Corum, Michigan legend Blake Corum, off to the NFL, sadly. So is wide receivers Roman Wilson and Cornelius Johnson going to the NFL draft. I think Roman Wilson is going to be an awesome NFL prospect, but this is not a draft show. This is a Michigan football show. So let's talk about some of the guys replacing those players. We'll start with Donovan Edwards, who is going to see a much bigger role this season, taking over full time for Blake Corum. Excited to have him back. Really, really big performance in the national championship. What do you think we're going to get from Donovan Edwards this season, Schwartz?
Edwards is a really hard player to pin down. I mean, all season it looked like he had lost his burst, and then all of a sudden against UW, which is admittedly an atrocious run defense last year, he showed up. And it's kind of like this whole thing where he's a big game player, but someone needs to tell him that being a big game player kind of means you also have to be an all game player. Like we need Donovan Edwards to show up every day of the season, not just when it matters most, but including when it matters most. He's going to be the lead back. No 1A, 1B situation. Donovan Edwards is getting our carries. I mean, I'm expecting Mullings to have some touches, but we've never seen Edwards really shoulder the workload except for those couple of games in the end of last season, the 22 season, that is, when Corum was out. Edwards he passed with flying colors, but we've never seen him do anything like that over the course of his season. So it'll be interesting to see how he how he's able to deal with a heavier workload when he's not just a change of pace guy or starting for a game at a time, when he has to tote the rock 15, 20 times a game for, anywhere from 12 to 15 games. So, or I guess it could be more than 15 this season, but I don't think we're getting more than 15. So I'm interested to see how he does with the lead role. He's obviously shown an ability to compete at the highest level, but can he do it every day?
Yeah, I'm excited to see him get more of a role. Cleo Mullings, too, worth noting, averaged over 4 yards after contact per attempt last season. So definitely has the ability to be more of a contributor this year. And then talk about some wide receivers. Starting trio expected to be Tyler Morris, Samaj Morgan, and Frederick Moore, potentially. Tyler Morris, I think, has really, really, really great breakout potential. Had that touchdown in the Rose Bowl against Alabama. Samaj Morgan also showed a lot of upside in his freshman season. So it's more of a reload to me at wide receiver, as much as losing Wilson and Johnson sucks. And then we also bring back Colston Loveland, who I know you love. Schwartz. I'll let you talk about Colston.
Yeah, I think he's probably going to be about the best tight end in the country this year. I don't know if the numbers will bear it out because, again, like even if Orji does look good enough to be a full-time passer, we might run a ton with him, be a kind of an option offense because it's a great way to use the skills. But numbers aside, I do think Loveland is going to be one of the best offensive skill players in the country this season. He has every making of a pro, and he just wasn't a huge central point of our offense last year because the pass game wasn't in general. And when it was the pass game, it was a lot of Roman Wilson. So I think it'll be fascinating to see Loveland this season. New quarterbacks tend to lean on big athletic tight ends as kind of a safety blanket. So he is going to be our first read, I think, very frequently. As much as I do agree with Wayne that there's a lot of upside in the receiving room. I mean, we saw Morris and Morgan have some of the biggest plays down the stretch in the postseason last year. But those aren't guys who have really established themselves, while Loveland is. I was honestly shocked when I realized that not only was he not going to the NFL draft, he couldn't because he was like 19 or 20 last season. He has all the he just looks like a seasoned veteran already, and I'm just excited to see what he looks like as not just the focal point of the passing game, but hopefully the focal point of the whole Michigan offense this season.
Yeah, I think he could be All-American potential, depending, like you said, depending on how much we actually end up throwing the ball. I think Colston Loveland has All-American potential.
I mean, if it does end up being a Jaden Davis situation, he is going to be staring down Loveland constantly. And it might not be super efficient for Colston, but he's going to be, if we're dropping back near the end zone, he's the dude for a touchdown. He's the dude to move the sticks. He's even the dude on first down, probably, when people are biting on the run. So I'm excited to see what he can do. His draft stock's going to be going through the roof, but not a draft show, and certainly not a 2025 draft show.
Absolutely. Talking about some guys who could see some pretty great draft stock next season. On the defensive line, bring back a ton of talent. Mason Graham, I think, he might be a top 5 pick in next year's draft. Led the defense last year with a 90 PFF grade, tied for second on the team with 29 pressures. Obviously had a tremendous postseason as well. And then you bring back Derek Moore, Kenneth Grant, Josiah Stewart on the defensive line. So ton of talent there. I guess a question for me, Schwartz, is what does that look like in a new scheme with Wink Martindale, and how do you think that'll be different this season?
Yeah, I as I've talked about in the past, I mean, the blitz-heavy Wink Martindale scheme, as much as it's great to have good blitzers when you're blitzing a lot, it's almost more important to have a secondary that can stand up. And, man, I think that's probably our best position group, thinking about it this season. It sucks that we lost Keon Sabb, and then lost Rod Moore. If that had happened in opposite order, I think Sabb probably stays. But there's obviously great talent there. Makari Page is back. Will Johnson, I think is the best defensive player in the country. We'll have to see, but he really had some big performances. He was unbelievable. I believe he picked off McCord while covering Marvin. He picked off Michael Penix, I believe, to open the second half of the national championship game in just a magnificent play. Will is phenomenal, and he's kind of the heart of the defense, and he'll need to be if we're going to be blitzing and leaving the secondary exposed. The question is what that second, what those safety positions are going to look like. Makari Page can be a bit of a box safety at times, so without Rod Moore providing coverage over the top, what's that going to look like, and who's the nickelback going to be, and who's playing in the slot with Mikey Sane was still moving on. There's a lot of question marks, but I don't think it in a bad way. I think there's a bunch of guys who could do the job. We just need to see who separates himself. And this is why spring game is great. You're going to have 2 full defenses, so everyone who has a realistic chance to be a starter is going to see field. And that's maybe the number one thing I'm looking at on the defensive side is who separates himself behind Will Johnson, because the D-line is set. Derek Moore, Kenneth Grant, Mason Graham. Oh my word, that's going to be an absolute blast. I don't even know if we need to blitz as much as Wink Martindale wants, because we might be able to get 4-man pressure pretty consistently. So I think there's still a lot to be excited about with the defense. Defense first, Michigan team, can't complain too much. We're going to be seeing some old school 17-13 games, glorified Iowa type of situation.
Well, hopefully not quite Iowa. That was quite the experience watching that team last season. Wanted to rip my eyeballs out, but I do think the secondary is an important position group to watch in the spring game. Losing Rod Moore sucks, but getting Quentin Johnston back is huge. He initially declared for the draft and is coming back now for his 6th season, especially with losing Keon Sabb at safety. I think Quentin Johnston needs to have a big year. And then there's depth at the safety position, but if there's one spot that worries me about this team right now, it is safety. So excited to see how that looks in the spring game. And yeah, like you said, Schwartz, Will Johnson allowed a 29.1 pass rating in coverage last season while guarding the other team's best player every single week. His tape against Marvin Harrison Jr., who one of the best wide receiver prospects in recent memory, his tape in that game before he got hurt, absolutely tremendous. So excited to see him All-American lock. Schwartz, not going to say lock, but
I don't want to say lock because injuries happen and voters are weird, and frankly, team success matters. And if we drop off from a national championship to 8 or 9 wins, it's not going to help his case. But I think that OSU game is a perfect illustration because you get this fun, not fun because you don't want to see Will get hurt, but this kind of interesting data set where you have half of a game with him and half of a game without him. And they completely got back into the game. And Marvin Harrison scored his touchdown, got some big chunk yardage. Yes, he had a couple big chunk plays with Will, but you can't clamp him completely all game. And that interception was one of the more important plays of the entire season that he had against Marvin. So, you see how he did against the best of the best at, I believe, 19 years of age, maybe 20. Yeah, there's no ceiling for Will Johnson. And I just can't wait to see what he does as probably the definitive leader of the defense this year.
Yeah, great film against Roma Dunze in the national championship as well. So an awesome prospect there. One last player I wanted to shout out on the defense is Jashawn Barnham, transfers from Maryland at linebacker, kind of an edge linebacker hybrid. I'm really excited to see how Wink wants to use him in the defense because he has some kind of edge hybrid versatility. And with the way that Wink runs his defense, that type of player is super valuable as a blitzer. So I think he could have a huge season in terms of pass rush productivity. But yeah, a lot to look forward to in the spring game. Schwartz, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, I'm glad you touched on the middle linebacker position, though, because that probably, I don't know, you talked about safety, but middle linebacker might be even thinner in terms of returning talent. And I do think that the Wink scheme can kind of work around that. If you're putting the coverage burden on the secondary instead of the middle linebackers, I think it's a lot easier to get value out of a newer player by sending him at the quarterback and making him uncomfortable. So maybe Wink's exactly what we need. Polarizing figure, but I'm super excited about him. The dude knows defense, and I think this has all the makings I alluded to it, of like an old school football team. We've got our offensive lineman turned head coach. We've got our real old school football guy, defensive coordinator. I think it's going to be a blast for, fans of that brand of football. Wayne, I don't know. Did you want to talk about prognosis in terms of, team outcomes and futures and stuff, or do we want to save that for after the spring game?
If there's anything specific you want to say right now, we can. Talk about what the odds are saying right now. I'll pull that up real quick. But definitely not expecting another undefeated season. But let's see. The current market has the win total at 9.5 with heavy juice to the under. Not necessarily something I'm rushing to play right now. There's a flat 9, one book, but anything you're liking, Schwartz?
Yeah, not with that juice. I would say that 9 is probably about the right number. It's a weird schedule because we play so many of the top teams in the country, but so many of them have to come to the big house. The one thing I would say is if you can find an early line on the game, yeah, probably take the Bucks at almost any price on the spread. It's unfortunate, but that team looks fantastic. They're going all in. They don't like that they're 0-3 against us, nor should they like it. But I would say that there's some really wacky odds out there for Michigan to make the playoff. Wayne, I know you brought it to my attention that we're approximately even money. I don't know. I think the committee's gonna care about how many teams they're sending from each conference, and I just don't think we can establish ourselves as one of the clear top 3 teams in the Big Ten with the way that USC, Oregon, Ohio State, and Penn State, not in that order, are set up talent-wise and schedule-wise. So if you can get a 2-sided market for yes and no to make the playoff, I would be betting no if it's around even money. If it's a 1-sided market, just leave it alone.
Gotta crush the hopes and dreams in April, Schwartz. Come on now.
Hey, I got called a homer last year, and then we won 15 consecutive games. I'm just kind of coming back to reality a little bit.
The current line on FanDuel for Michigan at Ohio State has the Buckeyes priced at -9.5. So
never mind, not any number. I gets under a touchdown at some point. I would hammer OSU.
I think I'm pretty sure that's come up a little bit. I think it opened maybe 7.5, but yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see the spring game. Definitely a new look for this team. I believe we're going to break the record for most drafted players.
The number is what? It's in the mid-teens, the high teens. I think we should. I'm glad to see that Zach is coming back up boards. It seems silly in hindsight because he's getting pretty high up, but I was scared about if he was going to pass medicals and even get drafted, immediately after the injury. So, yeah, we should set the record for most drafted players. It's interesting how very few of them are seen as first round prospects. I think it's because other than JJ, our first rounders are very young, and we actually might have more first rounders next year. But yeah, it should be. This was an NFL team last year, top to bottom. As much as I love guys like JJ, Blake, Will, it was not a star driven team. It was a collective effort. So I would love to see a lot of Michigan in the NFL next year. And if Michigan does take a step back, that'll give us a lot to watch, a lot to root for in the pro level. Especially would love to see JJ get maybe some of his guys to come with him wherever he goes, and would love to see some Wolverines in LA with Jim, and I'm sure he's going to prioritize them.
Yeah, I could definitely see that being the case. A lot of work for Sheronne Moore to do, and it all starts on Saturday. So tune into the spring game. Going to be exciting stuff there. And I don't know, Schwartz, should we tease this offseason project that we're working on?
Yeah, why not? I mean, a lot of the Michigan aspect is in this video, but we're not going to have a video like this for every single team. We are, however, going to be putting out some very, very useful Big Ten preview content for every team in the conference. We'll let you know more later about what that exactly is going to look like, but all the information that you could possibly want to bet the Big Ten this season is going to be coming right from us.
Yeah, exciting as we are putting that together for next season. So going to be a fun year, hopefully, for Michigan football. Probably not as fun as last season, but going to be exciting to see how some of these players progress, and with the spring game coming up around the corner. So thank you guys for watching. Please stay tuned for more football content from The Edge. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. Helps us out a ton. From me, Jacob Wayne, Will Schwartz. Exciting stuff. Appreciate you guys watching. Catch you in the next video.